They sang about love, hope, and unity, creating the soundtrack of a generation. But behind the glittering lights and polished performances Motown hid aside, the world was never meant to see. Now Berry Gordy himself has revealed that some of the very stars who defined the label's golden era were, in his words, actually evil. And trust me, the last name on this list will surprise you the most. Berry Gordy and the Vision of Motown. In 1959, Berry Gordy Jr. borrowed just $800 to chase a dream. That dream became Motown Records, a label that changed the course of music history. Gordy was determined to build something bigger than a record company. He wanted to create music that could reach across divides, a sound that belonged to everyone. He called it the sound of young America. The goal was simple but powerful, to blend the raw emotion of soul with the catchy pull of pop, so that the songs could move seamlessly from black neighborhoods in Detroit to the living rooms of white America. Gordy's formula was not only about music, it was about image, training, and discipline. He created an artist development program that worked almost like a finishing school. Singers learned how to walk, how to talk, even how to hold themselves on stage. They were given lessons in etiquette and polish to perfection because Gordy believed that success depended as much on presentation as it did on talent. This system produced stars who shined like no other, but it also came at a cost. Many artists later admitted they felt their lives were tightly controlled, as if their personalities were being managed along with their music. The success of Motown was undeniable. The Supremes, Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, The Temptations, and the Jackson 5 became household names. Songs born in the small Detroit house known as Hitsville, USA, climbed to the top of charts across the country. Yet behind the polished smiles and elegant choreography, cracks began to appear. Some of those cracks were financial. As the money poured in, artists and songwriters started to question whether they were being paid fairly. Over time, complaints grew louder, and resentment followed. The most famous fallout came in 1967 when the legendary songwriting team Holland Dozier Holland walked away. They had written countless Motown hits, but accused the label of withholding royalties and limiting their creative freedom. Their departure led to a lawsuit that dragged on for decades, only settling in 2004. The incident sent shockwaves through the industry and exposed how even the brightest empire had shadows lurking underneath. Berry Gordy's leadership style also drew criticism. Some insiders described him as a visionary, while others saw him as a strict taskmaster, more focused on control than compassion. Artists often felt torn between gratitude for the platform Motown gave them and frustration at the limits placed on their independence. The same system that helped young singers become global icons also left some of them feeling trapped, unable to escape the tightly managed image created for them. In recent years, Berry himself has opened up about some of the darker truths behind Motown's legacy. He has spoken about the feuds, the jealousies, and the human struggles hidden behind the music that defined an era. What he revealed was not meant to tarnish the achievements of the artist, but to show that even legends had flaws. For fans who grew up believing Motown was a perfect dream factory, these stories painted a more complicated picture. Let's start with the most surprising name of all, Diana Ross. When Diana Ross first walked into Hitsville, USA, she was just another young dreamer from Detroit, hoping for a chance to be heard. She joined the Primettes, the group that would later be renamed the Supremes, and her voice quickly stood out. Berry Gordy noticed her potential early on. Her tone was distinctive, silky, yet strong, and she had a presence that demanded attention. Gordy gave her opportunities others in the group did not receive, and over time, she became the centerpiece of the Supremes. The group's rise to fame was meteoric, with hits like Where Did Our Love Go?, Baby Love, and Stop. In the Name of Love, the Supremes became one of the most successful female groups in music history. Diana's voice was at the forefront of this success. Their songs climbed the charts, and they became the first Motown act to reach audiences not just in America, but around the world. Diana quickly became a star, celebrated for her glamorous style and commanding stage presence. Her relationship with Berry Gordy went beyond business. The two became romantically involved, and many insiders believed this connection influenced the direction of the group. Mary Wilson and Florence Ballard, her fellow Supremes, often felt sidelined. Florence, in particular, was deeply affected. Once a leading figure in the group, she saw her role diminished as Diana was pushed forward. Mary later admitted in her memoirs that favoritism created an atmosphere of jealousy and mistrust that was impossible to ignore. As Diana's star rose higher, tensions within the Supremes grew unbearable. By 1970, she left the group to pursue a solo career. For many, this was not a surprise. Her solo potential had been nurtured by Gordy for years, and she was being prepared for the spotlight all along. Songs like Ain't No Mountain High Enough and Touch Me in the Morning confirmed her ability to succeed on her own. She went on to dominate not just music, but also film, with her iconic performance in Lady Sings the Blues, earning her an Academy Award nomination. Yet the story was not all glamour. Diana Ross's rise was shadowed by accusations of arrogance and insensitivity. Fellow artists often described her as difficult to work with. Some claimed she distanced herself from her Motown peers once she had achieved success, preferring the company of Hollywood elites and high-profile figures. Reports of diva-like behavior followed her throughout her career, painting a picture of someone who valued power and position above friendships. Her relationship with Florence Ballard remains one of the most painful chapters in Motown's history. While Diana soared, Florence's career collapsed, and her life spiraled into poverty and despair before her untimely death at just 32. Many fans and historians believe that Berry Gordy's favoritism and Diana's willingness to embrace that dynamic left Florence with little room to survive. Despite the criticisms, Diana Ross remains one of the most iconic figures in music. Her success as both a group member and solo artist cannot be denied, but her story is the cost of ambition and the fractures that can appear when one person is lifted above the rest. Berry Gordy himself later admitted that the Supremes' story was both a triumph and a tragedy. If Diana Ross's story revealed the toll of favoritism, the next Motown legend's fall from grace exposed a darkness that reached even deeper. Let's turn to Smokey Robinson. When William "Smokey" Robinson first stepped into the orbit of Berry Gordy, it was not as a polished star, but as a teenager leading a vocal group called The Miracles. He had a book of songs he had written, and Berry instantly saw his potential. Gordy once said that Smokey had a writer's soul and a poet's heart, and those qualities quickly made him one of Motown's most valuable assets. Smokey became more than a singer. He was a songwriter, a producer, and eventually one of Berry's closest allies in shaping the Motown sound. With The Miracles, Smokey delivered some of Motown's earliest and most beloved hits. Songs like Shop Around, You've Really Got a Hold on Me, and The Tracks of My Tears were not only chart toppers, but also timeless classics that captured both joy and heartbreak with lyrical grace. His smooth, falsetto voice set him apart, but his songwriting for other artists expanded his reach even further. Smokey penned hits for The Temptations like My Girl and Get Ready, and wrote for Mary Wells, who soared with My Guy. In many ways, Smokey was the backbone of Motown, a quiet genius who gave others the material to shine. His relationship with Berry Gordy was especially close. More than colleagues, they were friends, and Berry often relied on Smokey's judgment in business and creative decisions. Smokey even served as a vice president at Motown, helping to guide the label through its most successful years. To many, he was Motown's steady hand, the one who kept the machine running smoothly behind the glamour. But as the years passed, a darker picture began to form. Smokey struggled privately with drug addiction in the 1980s, admitting later that cocaine nearly destroyed him. He described it as a period when he lost control of his life and even risked losing his career. Though he overcame those struggles and spoke openly about his recovery, it revealed a vulnerability that contrasted sharply with his polished public image. In 2025, Smokey Robinson's reputation faced its most serious challenge. 4 women who had worked as housekeepers filed a $50 million lawsuit against him, accusing him of misconduct and severe labor violations stretching from 2007 to 2024. According to the lawsuit, the women alleged coercion, physical violations, and even confinement. They claimed that their silence was forced through threats, leaving them powerless for years. Smokey responded publicly, denying the accusations outright and calling them bulls. He then filed a defamation suit against his accusers, setting the stage for a bitter legal battle. The The case, scheduled for trial in 2027, continues to cast a shadow over his legacy. For fans who grew up with his music, these revelations have been difficult to reconcile. The man who wrote about love with such tenderness now faces allegations that paint a far darker picture. To many, it feels like the shine of Motown's golden voice has been dimmed by controversy. His contributions to music remain undeniable, but his name now carries the weight of accusations that may never be forgotten, regardless of the trial's outcome. As Smokey Robinson's fall showed how even Motown's poets had shadows, the next story takes us into the chaos of a voice that could move crowds but lived a life consumed by turmoil. David Ruffin. David Ruffin's entry into Motown came at a turning point for the Temptations. The group already had a reputation, but they lacked the spark that would carry them to the very top. That spark arrived when Ruffin, with his unmistakable raspy tenor, stepped into the role of lead singer. His first major moment came with My Girl, a song written by Smokey Robinson that became an instant classic. Ruffin's voice gave it warmth and strength, and the song remains one of Motown's most beloved recordings. His performances made audiences believe every word he sang, and his stage presence elevated the Temptations from a polished vocal group into superstars. As success rolled in, Ruffin became the face of the group. Songs like Ain't Too Proud to Beg, Beauty Is Only Skin Deep, and I Wish It Would Rain showcased his range and raw emotional delivery. Fans were drawn not only to his voice, but to his magnetic charisma on stage. For a time, David Ruffin was Motown's golden performer, adored by audiences and respected by peers. His relationship with fellow stars also shaped his story. Ruffin's connection with Tammy Terrell, the young and talented singer paired with Marvin Gaye, became one of Motown's most talked-about romances. At first, they appeared as the picture of a glamorous couple, but behind closed doors, the story was far darker. Reports later surfaced of Ruffin's abusive behavior. Friends of Tammy recalled moments of fear and distress, and some alleged that the violence worsened her fragile health. Terrell's tragic collapse on stage in 1967 and her untimely death at just 24 added a heartbreaking dimension to their relationship, leaving behind questions about how much her suffering was tied to the chaos of her time with Ruffin. Substance abuse was another battle Ruffin could not win. As the Temptations reached new heights, his dependence on drugs grew stronger. Bandmates recalled missed rehearsals, unpredictable moods, and increasing tensions within the group. His behavior became erratic, and his demands escalated. He wanted the Temptations to be renamed David Ruffin and the Temptations, believing his fame eclipsed that of the others. This demand deeply angered his bandmates and led to confrontations that Gordy could no longer ignore. By 1968, Ruffin was fired from the group, a move that stunned fans but reflected how destructive his behavior had become. Life after the Temptations was not easy for him. Though he pursued a solo career and scored minor hits like My Whole World Ended, The Moment You Left Me, he never regained the success or stability he once had. Addiction and volatile relationships continued to follow him, leaving his career marked by missed opportunities and personal struggles. Friends and fans often described him as both a brilliant performer and a tragic figure undone by his demons. David Ruffin died in 1991 at the age of 50, his life cut short by a cocaine overdose. His passing was a painful reminder of the cost of fame when personal battles go unresolved. While his voice remains immortal through the music he left behind, his story stands as one of Motown's darkest tales, filled with talent, heartbreak, and self-destruction. David Ruffin's story showed how fame and addiction can destroy even the brightest voices. The next tale reveals how genius and pain collided in one of Motown's most celebrated legends. Marvin Gaye. Marvin Gaye's path into Motown began with quiet determination. Born in Washington, D.C., he grew up singing in church, where his father, a strict Pentecostal preacher, expected perfection from him. Music became both a gift and an escape. And when Marvin arrived in Detroit, he quickly found his way into Gordy's circle. At first, he worked as a session drummer for Motown acts, backing artists like the Marvelettes. But Gordy soon realized his voice was something rare, soulful, and stirring, a sound that could carry deep emotion into every listener's heart. By the early 1960s, Marvin Gaye had stepped forward as a singer in his own right. He recorded Stubborn Kind of Fellow and Pride and Joy, songs that introduced him as a rising star. As the years passed, he produced hit after hit, from the upbeat How Sweet It Is to Be Loved by You, to timeless duets with Tammy Terrell, including Ain't No Mountain High Enough and You're All I Need to Get By. His partnership with Terrell captured the spirit of young love and joy. But behind the music, her declining health and eventual death in 1970 devastated Marvin, leaving him shaken and grief-stricken. His relationship with Berry Gordy was both rewarding and stormy. Gordy admired Marvin's talent, but also struggled with his growing independence. Marvin was not content to be just another hitmaker. He wanted his music to mean something, to address the pain and uncertainty of the world. In 1971, he released What's Going On, a groundbreaking album that mixed social commentary with unforgettable melodies. Gordy initially resisted the project, believing it was too political, but Marvin insisted. The record became one of Motown's greatest achievements, proof that music could be both commercially successful and deeply meaningful. Yet Marvin's personal life told a different story. Despite his success, he was plagued by inner turmoil. His strict religious upbringing left scars, and his relationship with his father was filled with conflict. Friends recalled Marvin speaking often about the tension at home, where love and violence seemed bound together. His marriages were troubled, marked by jealousy and accusations of infidelity. Money troubles followed him too, with debts piling up even during the height of his career. Substance addiction further fueled his struggles. Cocaine became a constant in his life, worsening his paranoia and deepening his depression. At times, he withdrew from the industry altogether, leaving fans waiting for years between projects. His brilliance never faded, but his battles often overshadowed it, leaving those close to him worried about his future. The final chapter of Marvin Gaye's life was tragic. In 1984, after returning to live with his parents, tensions with his father exploded. On April 1st, during a heated argument, Marvin's father shot him, ending his life at just 44 years old. The world mourned the loss of a man whose voice had defined an era, a singer who gave the world both joy and pain in equal measure. As Marvin Gaye's story revealed the cost of genius, the next tale shows how fame shaped an entire family and led to struggles both inside and outside the spotlight. The Jackson 5. The story of the Jackson 5 is one of the most remarkable chapters in Motown's history. The group of brothers from Gary, Indiana came to Detroit in the late 1960s with raw talent, boundless energy, and a frontman who was just a child, but already had the magnetism of a superstar. That child was Michael Jackson. Berry Gordy immediately recognized the potential in the group, especially in Michael. He once said that Michael had the soul of James Brown and the grace of a natural-born star. Under Gordy's guidance, the Jackson 5 were signed to Motown in 1968, and their rise to fame was almost instant. Their first 4 singles, I Want You Back, ABC, The Love You Save, and I'll Be There, all shot to #1 on the Billboard charts. Few acts in music history have experienced such an explosive debut. With their coordinated dance routines, infectious energy, and catchy melodies, the Jackson 5 became a global phenomenon. Young fans adored them, and their music crossed racial and cultural barriers, in keeping with Gordy's vision of Motown as the sound of young America. The Jackson 5 shared stages and studios with other Motown greats. Michael was mentored by Diana Ross, who introduced the group at their launch, presenting them to the world as her protégés. The Jackson brothers interacted with Smokey Robinson, Stevie Wonder, and Marvin Gaye, absorbing influences from legends while contributing their own fresh sound. For a time, it seemed the group had everything: fame, money, and a future with limitless possibilities. But behind the polished performances, cracks began to form. The Jackson family's strict upbringing under their father, Joe Jackson, was already a source of strain. He managed the group with an iron hand, and the boys endured relentless discipline. Stories later emerged of harsh punishments and a home life filled with pressure rather than comfort. While their father's strictness helped shape their professionalism, it also left scars that followed the brothers into adulthood. As they grew older, tensions with Motown deepened. By the mid-1970s, the Jackson brothers felt restricted by the label. They wanted more creative freedom, especially Michael, who was beginning to show signs of the artist he would later become. But Motown insisted on maintaining control, keeping them tied to its formula. When the group decided to leave the label in 1975 and sign with Epic Records, Motown struck back. Because the company owned the name The Jackson 5, the group had to rebrand as The Jacksons. Jermaine Jackson, who was married to Berry Gordy's daughter Hazel, stayed behind at Motown, creating a painful family divide. The legal battles over their name highlighted how little power artists had against major labels at the time. For the Jacksons, it was not just a fight for their identity, but a reminder of how easily control could be taken away. Despite their continued success after Motown, the shadow of those disputes lingered. The Jackson 5's story is remembered for its groundbreaking success, but also for the darker realities of fame. From the strict hand of their father to the tug-of-war with Motown over ownership and control, the group's journey reflects the sacrifices and struggles hidden behind their joyful music. For Michael Jackson, these years were just the beginning of a life that would bring unimaginable highs and devastating lows. People remember Motown with a mix of nostalgia and deep respect. For many, its songs are tied to their most personal memories of love, heartbreak, and joy, making Motown more than just music, but a part of life itself. Audiences recall the polished performances, the unforgettable harmonies, and the way those records made them feel connected, no matter where they came from. Older generations see it as the sound that carried them through social change, while younger fans rediscover it as timeless art that still feels fresh. Above all, Motown is remembered as the place where raw talent met vision, and where music became a bridge that united people across the world. What are your thoughts on Berry's revelation? Share your thoughts in the comments.